can start back up. You were telling me about
And
young Jill.
and I told her this one morning. I've forgotten just when it was. Probably, maybe around about May of '45. I heard early one morning. I heard shooting, and I got up and I went up, and the sergeant was down, hunched down, and he said, "Sir, there's a Jap right there," and he said, I'm shooting at him, and so about that time he shot again, and I heard this scream, and he hit him, and hit him about here in the shoulder, and so we went on up to him, and the Jap was not armed, and this sergeant, I said, "Well, put him on that bunk there, and I'll go down and get Doc Martin." And so I went down to get Doc Martin, who was my roommate, my tent mate, and I woke him up. I told him, I said, "The Jap been shot up there," and he said, "Well, let the SOB die." And I said, "Well, you don't want to go take a look at him?" He said, "Yeah, I'll go take a look at him." So I went up there, and this Jap lay, but his head had been cut off. And I said, "What in the world happened?" And he said, "Sir, this flip," that's what they call the Filipinos, said, "I turned my back, and this flip had a machete and cut his head off." And so it just, and they had his head up on we had a deal that we used. We made a table about this high to put a lantern on. The higher you got it, the more light it gave you. And so they had his head up on one of those with a cigarette dangling from his lip, and there he was, cut his head off. And so to illustrate the reason I tell you this, the Japanese were so brutal to the Filipinos that it was horrible, the things they did to the Filipinos, and the Filipinos hated them worse than anything on earth. They hated Japs, and I imagine they still do. And it was deserved, the hatred they had for them, and and their hate was for the Japs, but they loved MacArthur. MacArthur was akin to God, because he had been, well, of course, MacArthur had been head of the Filipino army before the war started, and but he had built up such esteem in the Philippines that he was idolized, and of course his "I shall return," they knew that he said that, and he did. But if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them, but I hate to have bored you with such a long diatribe, that might say. A lot of funny things happened in the service, and there were a lot of laughter and fun, but a lot of regrets too. I take anything for having served, but I wouldn't give you a dime to do it again. I wouldn't, because just being away from home is something that I just can't describe, particularly when you're married and you're away from home. Of course, I wasn't married the entire time. I married when we were at Camp Forest, Tennessee, my first assignment. I asked for time off to get married, and I was denied the time, but then the colonel got a few drinks in him and gave me time off. When the day I got married, he said, "You took a few days off now," and so I did. Yeah, we married. Her wedding cost a lot of money. Her daughter's wedding. I said, "Well, mine cost $3." I said, "We had an army chaplain. I didn't have to pay him, and we had an army chaplain." A chapel, and that was free, and the chaplain told me I ought to pay the singer. I had a young soldier that sang, and I ought to pay him $3, and so I gave him $3, so that was the total expense of my wedding, and of course it must have worked, because after 63 years, we're still together.
I'll just, I think, ask one more question about the war, and then we can move on to some of the post-war stuff. Is there any one particular memory that sticks out in your mind about your time in service above all the other ones?
Gosh, I've never thought about that. I have a feeling that I was spared. My life was spared, and I also feel that the Lord took care of me. Because there are many situations that I was in that had some danger, and I came through, and I just to answer your question specifically, I suppose the fact that I felt proud to have done it, to have served, and as I told you initially, I wasn't a hero, and I did get a few medals, but I didn't get any big ones, like the Medal of Honor or anything like that, and but it got to be at the time. I thought how terrible it would have been not to have been in the Army, because everybody was in it, and the war was a complete unity of the American people. You have never, at your age, you've never experienced anything to compare with it, but everybody had one interest, and that was to win the war. Women went into bomber plants, women were Rosie the Riveter, everybody went all out, and the great service. What in the world would I have done to face people? Because everybody was in it at the time, and I was glad to be in it in a way. I mean, it was hard, and we worked hard, and but still, you had a great feeling of accomplishment, because, and one thing that I learned, that an officer's word is his bond. You don't lie, and you don't steal, and you don't do anything to disgrace the service. I worked for the State Board of Pardons and Paroles. I was chairman of it. I was a member of it, and people will cut your throat. They'll stab you in the back. Your own people will try to destroy you. But in the service, we had a camaraderie that, in fact, my feeling is that the soldier fights more for his companion, his buddy, the guy next to him, than he does for the country, because there's such a camaraderie. You just won't let your buddy down. It would be disgraceful to and to refuse an order would be disgraceful. I mean, it would be a shame that you would never get over. And I've been given a lot of orders that I disagreed with and that I'd rather not do, and I've been sent into places that I didn't want to go, but it was yes sir and no sir, and you always did what you were told, and you always did the best you could, and you don't find that in state government. You don't find it anywhere else. I was in the insurance business for a while, and I've been in real estate, and these other agents will cut your throat. They'll do everything in the world for $1. But in the military service, you got loyalty to your commanders, and I had one commander who was awfully strict, awfully hard, but I look back and respect him greatly, because he made us good officers. He used to say, blankety blank blank, ladies present, I won't repeat it, I didn't tell you to get married, and that doesn't mean a thing to me. I didn't tell you to marry, and you do this and you do that, and you know, if you tell him I'd like to be home the weekend, you're not going to be, and you know, it's just and things like that. But still, I still feel loyalty to him, because he helped me. He really did, I think, and he made me a better administrator and a better officer, because he was hard, rough. I remember once he came, I was lying down. We'd been out on the range all day in the hot sun in California. It was probably in November, but still it was hot. And we'd been on the range, and everything was over, and the Tech Georgia game was on, and I had it on radio. So I was just about dropping, tired. I'd been on my feet all day, so I lay down for a minute to listen to the game, and up he drove. And he got up and saluted him and reported, and he said, stop by my office on your way in. And so I did, and he said, get your heels together. He said, everything you've ever done, this is the way he talked, in this unit has been very good, but this is very bad. I saw you lying down out there, and what do you think your soldiers, your troopers thought of that? And he said, and I want you to take this to heart. Oh boy, he chewed me out plenty, and but he, at the same time, I was called to General Bruce, Lieutenant General, the post commander at the Tank Destroyer Center, and they told me, said, you report to General Bruce, wants to see you. And I thought, gee, here's a lousy captain going to General Bruce, why? So I went, and I went in to him and reported, saluted, and he said, Captain, you've been making some wild statements around here, haven't you? I said, sir, I don't understand. He said, well, I'll just read you a few of them. He said, I got a file here on you. He said, here you made a statement that you'd like to machine gun every black on this post. Did you say that? I said, yes, sir, I said that. And he said, here's a statement, you said you wouldn't eat with the bastards. Did you say that? Yes, sir, I did. And he said, well, what have you got to say for yourself? I said, well, sir, I said that to a close friend. I was in college with him. He was best man in my wedding. I was best man in his wedding. I introduced him to his wife, and I know he didn't report this. These walls have got their just single beaver board, and somebody overheard me, but I am not going to machine gun anybody, and I have no intention of doing that. And I said, as far as eating with them, I eat with them every day. And I said, I don't particularly like it, but I do it, and I do it every day. And you wouldn't believe what he said to me. He said, Captain, I don't like them either. He said, I wouldn't have one in my home. He said, the War Department is spending millions to make them happy, and they're not happy. So you've got to lean over backwards to make them happy if you can. And he said, I understand this, that it's a case of you and your close friend talking over your troubles at night in the BOQ. And he said, but be careful what you say. And he said, General Sullivan, he called General Sullivan in. He said, General, you close this file. It's a case just like you and I talking over our troubles at night. And he said, all other reports are that this is an outstanding young officer. And he said that's all it is, just a case of talking over his troubles at night. So luckily, Bruce was from Texas, and I got through that all right. And of course, things have changed. They're not like that now, and it's probably just as well that they aren't. But back then, they were, and you know, the Army was not integrated then at all. You had black troops and you had white troops. You didn't have them in the same unit, and so it did get frustrating at times being with black troops, but some of them were outstanding soldiers. Some of them were the old 10th Cavalry people that we had. They were outstanding. But we had some funny things happen. You had one that his name was James Davis, and he was from Mississippi. And the first time I saw James Davis, I reported to the company, and here was a black soldiers with a gas mask on, and all kind of muted sounds coming from him. And I said, what's going on here? And he said, the first sergeant said, "Sir, that's James Davis." Said he cries, and when he cries, I put a gas mask on him so I can't hear him. And said, and so I said, "Well, take it off. Let's talk to him." And so he took it off, and he said, "Sergeant Blasingill's ruined my life. He's ruined my life." And so he cried and cried, and so Colonel Darragh, the officer I spoke of, was so strict. He used to tell me, he said, "Partain, I want you to get rid of that James Davis." He said, "You're keeping him around for your own entertainment." He said, "Get rid of him. He's no good. Get him out of here." And so I'd say, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll do what I can." And but I remember one incident. We were out and on a break on a march, and they saw a big lizard in Texas, about so long, and they have them big down there, like they have people, and everything's big in Texas. So they were remarking on it, and James Davis hadn't seen it, and he said, "Lizard, who ever heard of a lizard being afraid of a lizard?" He said, "Well, a lizard couldn't bite you, it didn't have any teeth, couldn't if it wanted to." And so I said, "Davis, yes, sir." I said, "Bring me that lizard." He said, "Sir, I don't like the idea of picking up no lizard." And I said, "Well, you said it didn't have any teeth, couldn't bite you or anything. Bring it over here. I want the lizard." And he moped over and saw it. He said, "Sir, this ain't no lizard, it's a young alligator." And I said, "Bring it on over here." And he said, "Sir, Moses was on the Mount of Sinai, and the Lord said to Moses, 'Pick up the serpent.' And Moses said, 'Lord, I am too afraid of this serpent.' And the Lord said, 'Pick it up.' And he picked it up. But if the lieutenant would, I'm too afraid of this lizard." And we had things like that. I enjoyed being with black troops, the entertainment and all, and the camaraderie even with them. But it'll be frustrating. And this Hollingsworth, Aubrey Hollingsworth, we were visiting the battalion surgeon's wife, who was in the hospital, and we had a few drinks, and we gone to see Lucy, his wife, and so I happened to go down the hall in the hospital. We were in the Scott and White Hospital in Temple, Texas, the famous hospital. And so I saw this young, pretty nurse, and I had just enough to drink. I went over and grabbed it. I said, "Come on, I want to take you in here. I want to show you something." So in Hollingsworth, my friend was there, and I said, "Holly, look what I found." And she said, "And did we have fun?" And so 2 months later, he married her. And this is a guy that I was in college with, and so since then he has been to see me. He's visited me. He stayed in the Army, and I got out, and he stayed in, and he was on a new assignment at Fort Benning. So he went on down to Benning, and within a few weeks, he was out cutting his grass and dropped dead. And he was a huge fellow, big shoulders and all, and I don't know, he'd been into a lot of things, but he died, dropped dead. But he's the one that I confided in at night, and he did in me. But I was very fortunate that this General Bruce was from the South. Otherwise, he wouldn't have understood at all. And so things like that, I just felt that the Lord always had his hand on me and was taking care of me. And he still is.
Tell me a little bit, getting along those lines, about your life after the service. Did you take advantage of the GI Bill?
Not really. My wife tried to get me to, and that's one of the great mistakes in my life, but I didn't. I figured, well, it's just like I would have stayed in the Army, but here I was a major, and they talked about your permanent rank as a major. I mean, your permanent rank is a first lieutenant, and your wartime rank is a major. So they convinced me that I would have to go back to being a first lieutenant if I stayed in the Army. Well, that wasn't true, because everybody kept their rank. Nobody had to go back. But I was married, and I figured I cannot afford to go to college. And I had to get out and make a living because I was married. And well, my wife worked, and she said, "Well, we'll make it some way." And I make so much a month, and then you get the GI Bill. Well, I didn't listen to her, and I regret it, but no, I didn't go back to college, school, and although later I went to the resident course of the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, and my commander in the 81st Division was General Sutherland, and General Sutherland came to me and said, if you will go to the Command and General Staff College, I will, well, first he said this. He said, not right after I entered the unit, he said, if you go to the Adjutant General School in Fort Benjamin Harrison, and I'll promote you when you get back and make you the public information officer because you've had experience along that line. So I said, well, okay, I'll do it, and I did. And so when I came back, he kept his word and he promoted me to light colonel. And so then he came to me and he said, Partain, I want you to be major commander in the unit, and I think you ought to go to command at Staff College, and if you will, when you get back, I'll promote you to colonel. And so I said, all right, and I did, and I went, and then when I came back, I was promoted to colonel, and so let's see, I've sort of got off the subject. What was your question?
No, I mean that's very. So you continued in the military after the war.
Yeah, I joined this unit. In fact, I'll never forget the night, my first drill. I drilled, well, my first drill with the division is what I should say, but I continued to drill for free. See, they pay you if you're in an active unit, but I drilled for months, I guess probably about 5 or 6 years, and got no pay at all. I did it for free because I wanted to stay in, and I thought it was the thing to do. And then I got an assignment to the division, the 81st Division, and the first night that I joined it, he called me in, the general, and he said, Partain, I want to know how you got in this division. He said, nobody gets in the division unless I know about it, and you have been ordered into it, and I didn't know about you. And I said, well, General, I went to the, forgotten the term they use, anyway, the headquarters of the reserve, and asked for an assignment. And he said, I said, but if you object to it, I'll be glad to get out. They can transfer me out. He said, no, not you're in it, you can stay. But he later became a great friend and a strong booster. I know when I had some problems with the Atlanta papers, and he went all out for me. They ran a front page story where he praised me, and then there was an editorial writer named John Crown who worked for the Journal, and I did not know him, but General Sullivan knew him well, and General Sullivan got him to write an article about me, and he did, and I still have never met him, and I did meet him later, but he wrote this article without even knowing me, and it resulted in my being reappointed to another term, really. And so General Sullivan became one of my strongest boosters, and he was a great general and a great friend. Now, of course, this was reserve. I never had him in the Army, but he would call me up, things like we had the mayor of New Orleans, I've forgotten his name. He was a general in the reserve, and he was the principal speaker at an ROA meeting, and General Sullivan called me one night and he said, Partain, you remember the general's name who was mayor in New Orleans back then? He was a very colorful mayor. Anyway, he said, we're embarrassed that he's the speaker, and this was the afternoon, he was going to speak at night. He said, we don't have but 20 people with reservations. And he said, I want you to do what you can to see if we can get a crowd there. And I said, well, General, we don't have much time, but I got on the telephone and I used his his name. I said, General Sullivan wants you there. And so we wound up with 200 people there. And General Sullivan thought that was wonderful. He was so grateful to me. He said, Partain, you saved the day. I can't think of that. Anyway, he was a very colorful guy down in New Orleans. Anyway, General Sullivan was a great man. His civilian job, he was personnel director for the city of Atlanta. And you probably have heard of him, Carl Sullivan.
The name does sound familiar. Well, tell me a little bit about your relationship with Lester Maddox.
Well, now, you got, how much time we got?
Oh, well, actually, the tape usually has about 30 minutes left on it, but I know that I don't want y'all to hit 400 traffic
I'm taking
right in the heat of it.
it's up to you.
I'll be glad to talk about him.
Hit the high points.
Much more so than about the Army. But, well, first of all, he, the poet said, many a flower is born to blush unseen and wasted sweetness on the desert air. And I feel that way about him. If it had not been for the press or the Atlanta newspapers, he would have accomplished great things, greater things than he did. But a dropout, a high school dropout who never finished high school, who becomes governor of the sovereign state of Georgia, is no mean accomplishment. He was a brilliant man, not well educated. In fact, he wasn't educated, but just probably junior high or something like that. But he had a great mind, and he was absolutely maligned, almost to the point of distraction by the Atlanta newspapers, and it traveled from the Atlanta newspapers on to others. I remember the first time I met him. He was running for mayor of Atlanta against Hartsfield, and I was a member of the Downtown Atlanta Lions Club, and so I went to the president of the club, and I said, you've had Hartsfield speak here, how about having Maddox speak? And I didn't know Maddox, and he said, oh, he doesn't have a chance, nobody wants to hear him. And I said, well, just to be fair, he's running for mayor, and you had one candidate, let's have the other. And he said, well, if you insist, I said, go invite him. So I went by his restaurant. He had a big restaurant out on Hemp Hill Avenue. And I invited him to speak to the Lions Club. And so we had what was known as a attendance prize, where you chipped in, I think it was a quarter apiece at each meeting, and then they drew a name, and the winner took all the money. And so they, what would happen, they'd have the attendance prize drawn at the last thing of the meeting. And everybody'd be ready to run, so you'd have to listen to that, see if they won it. And then they would have it, and it all scattered. So they had him speak after the attendance prize even. And just a mad shuffle of people, and nobody paying any attention, and here this little guy up trying to speak, and he fell on his face terribly, and I felt so sorry for him that I went out and apologized to him. And I got to be friends with him. And well, just one day my son was in the Atlanta Boy Choir, and I happened to be president of the Boy Choir that year, and so I went to him and I said, "Lester, we got a program here. We're going to have a concert. I'll give you a chance to increase the size of your restaurant." And he laughed, said, "Oh, that kind of advertisement doesn't do any good." He said, but I'll give it to you. What do you want?" And I said, "Well, why don't you take a page?" And he said, "Well, yeah, I'll take it." He said, "Write something for me." And so, see, he wrote a column in the paper every Saturday. And I'll get to that in a minute. And so I thought, well, I'll try to be like him. I'll try to get words that he would say. So I said, and he always started his column, he said, "Pickrick says," and then he sort of an editorial thing. And I said, "Pickrick says, we love boys and good music." And I said, handed it to him, I said, "How's this?" Without hesitation, he put an asterisk after that, and in little print at the bottom, he says, "We love all hungry people." And so that was published the same, just the way he did it. And it was the hit of the program because, you know, it had humor and people enjoyed it. So all of the stories you've heard about him, about having having bats and hitting people over the head and all that, he never hit anybody. He had it was a symbol that, and he was not a racist. They made him a racist. He was this. He was a businessman who built this business from scratch. Started off, he borrowed $2 to sell some hot dogs, and it grew from there. And he was such a dominant person that it just grew. And so he never, his feeling was that I've made this business and I have a right to say who I serve and who I don't serve. And at that time, you don't, being your age group, you don't understand back the way segregation was. But back then, no restaurant that served blacks could stay open. It couldn't endure. But then they passed, the Congress of the United States passed laws that required it. And then we had some people who carried out the laws, and some that didn't, and some opposed it. Well, he opposed it, but he did not ever hit anybody or anything, and he was as good to his people as anybody could be, and he hired all blacks. And when he was governor, he integrated more state government with blacks than all previous governors combined had done. And he even appointed one black to the corrections board, and he integrated the state troopers and all kinds of things like that. He was, and Hosea Williams, I don't know whether you remember him or not, but Hosea said that he was the best friend that the blacks ever had, and that he was the best governor that Georgia ever had. Hosea said that. And but he was a man of unblemished character, a man who had, he had never tasted whiskey in his life. He had never smoked a cigarette. He had smoked cigars, but he quit that. And his character was, I said to him one day, I said, Lester, all these years I've known you, I've never heard you say a single cuss word. I said, don't you ever cuss? He said, yeah, Jack, I did one time. And I said, well, I'd like to hear about that. You must have really been mad then. He said, well, here's what happened. He said, you know Lee Evans? And I said, yeah, I know. He was city council. He said he was a lawyer, and I had a grocery store. And I sold the grocery store, and I carried Virginia, I was his wife, by to the grocery store, and I sold it. I bought the grocery store. It said when I bought it, and he said I bought the store, and I bought it with all the stock. And he said I took Virginia by to see our new grocery store, and there was nothing on the shelves. It was all gone. And he said, I bought a grocery store like it was with all the groceries. And he said, the next day I called Lee Evans and I said, look, what happened to the stock? And he said, well, it mustn't matter, 'cause you know how it is. Somebody's selling a grocery store. They want to get a few groceries for themselves, and they decide to take a few things. And he said, yeah, but they took it all. And he said, well, I've got your contract, and it's too bad, but that's the way it is. And he said, I said, you're nothing but a damn crook. And he said, that's the only time in my life I've ever cussed. And I said, gee, well, I said, I think I would have cussed then. So when he was elected governor, they were going to have the Democratic Party in Macon to more or less, well, I'd say to certify the election or something. So the Democrats all assembled, and I was to make a speech about him. And I used that incident in my speech. And we had to submit them to the campaign manager in advance because he didn't want to be embarrassed. And so when they saw mine, all the others rewrote their speeches. They thought, gee whiz, they didn't know it was going to get personal like that. So, and it started the fact that he was honest, but it didn't start as far as he was concerned because he was probably the most honest governor we've ever had. Now, I don't mean that Carl Sanders stole money. He didn't. But he went to a big law firm after he left the governor's office and made him rich. But Lester never got a quarter more than they paid him, and in fact, being governor broke him because he opened a restaurant in underground Atlanta after he did that, and it wouldn't pay, it failed. And then he opened another restaurant in Sandy Springs. The same thing happened there. And so he didn't benefit from being governor as far as financial at all. And but I tell you, could we have a restroom break? And I
Absolutely. Actually, we've got.
Is that what you want me to tell you?
Yeah, let's hear about that.
Well, Carter telephoned me when I was in the dentist's office in the chair getting my teeth worked on, and they said, Mr. Carter is on the telephone and wants to talk to you very much. And so I said, all right, I'll talk to him. So I got up with this thing around me and went to the phone, and it was Jimmy Carter. And he said, Jack, I just wanted to talk to you. He said, I would like to have Lester backing me. And he said, you're about the only one that has a direct lead to Lester. And I said, well, Lester and I were talking about that today, and he said that I ought to tell you to quit talking about Carl Sanders all the time and talk about what Jimmy Carter is going to do. And so he said, well, you know, he's right about that. He said, and I'm going to follow that advice. He said, so then they had the election. Well, first, though, Hugh Carter, who was Jimmy's first cousin, he and I were in the Army together, so I knew Hugh well. And he was in the 81st Division in Reserve. And so Hugh called me frantic one night. I guess it was about probably Saturday night. And he said, Jack, did you see the Constitution today? I said, yeah. And he said, well, it looks like Lester's going to endorse Carl Sanders. Said he did everything but do that. And he said, we had the election won, we thought, until Lester opened his big mouth, and now look what's going to happen. So we're going to lose it. And I said, well, what have I got to do with that? I said, I can't control what Lester says and who he endorses. And he said, well, do this. He said, just as an old friend, see if you can arrange tomorrow for Jimmy and me to visit Lester and talk to him, and we can probably get him to not do that or to remain neutral. And I said, well, I'll do what I can. I'll call Lester and see if he'll do it. And so I called Lester, and he was governor, and I called the mansion, and I talked to him, and I told him, I said, they want to come see you tomorrow. And he said, well, I don't think it'll do any good. He said, I think I'm leaning toward Carl. And I said, well, will you do this? Will you see them? And he said, yeah, I'll see them. And I said, well, what time? And he said, tell them to be here at 10 o'clock. That's Sunday morning. And so I called Hugh back, and well, as a matter of fact, I called Jimmy's house, and Ms. Maddox answered the phone. Ms. Carter answered the phone, and I said, is Jimmy there? And she said, no, he's not. And I said, well, I explained to her what happened. I said, well, Governor Maddox says for them to be at the mansion at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. And so she said, all right, I'll tell Jimmy that he's somewhere. And so then Hugh called me on Monday. He said, Jack, I want to tell you, he said, Jimmy says that you that he's indebted to you, and he's going to write you a letter. And I said, well, tell him not to bother, write me a letter. I said, I've just got the appointment for you. And so he said, well, it worked out. We got Lester to agree to be neutral, not to say anything, not to endorse anybody. So then he called me on a Wednesday. The election was Tuesday. And he said, Jack, Jimmy says that you won the election for him. And I said, well, Jimmy's accustomed to making rash remarks like that, and I didn't. And so he said, well, he is really happy, and he's going to write you a letter. And I said, tell him not to bother. And so then Lester and he started, well, the way it happened, Lester was elected lieutenant governor, and Carter was elected governor. And so I saw that Lester was actually, Lester was the peak of his popularity, and the only reason he didn't run for governor because he couldn't under the Constitution at that time. Your governor couldn't succeed himself, and so he ran for lieutenant governor and was elected overwhelmingly. And so they started a little bickering, and the way it happened, Carter called Lester and asked him to come down to the office. And he said, I just want to tell you that if you do anything to cause my program not to go through, what I'm going to do. In other words, some kind of veiled threat or something. And Lester says, well, my daddy never talked to me like that, Governor. And he said, well, I'm telling you, you just better not do anything because I'm the governor and you're only a lieutenant governor, and that's a part-time job. And so that infuriated Lester. And then they got bickering back and forth, so Carter would call me up and say, Jack, will you come over to the office? And so he'd take me back in a room way in the back, just a small room about this size, two of us, and he'd say, now, Jack, I'm just going to let my hair down to you. He said, that guy is more popular than I am, and if he does anything, he can cause me my whole program to collapse, and I won't get my program through. And tell him this. See if you can tell him this. And he'd tell me the things to tell Lester. Well, I'd go back and tell Lester, and he'd say, well, you go tell him this. So here I was going back and forth between them. And so I thought I got them all together. And Mary, my wife, and I was sitting one Sunday afternoon listening to the radio, and he came on and said, Governor Maddox just called Governor Carter a big liar. And I said, oh my goodness, it's broken out now for sure. And so that was the end. I couldn't get them together then. And so Carter, it just got worse and worse. And Lester would tell me things, and then Carter would call me up and he'd tell me things, and so it finally came down to they just agreed to disagree, and so Carter appointed a fellow named Cecil McCall to the parole board. First, I wanted him to appoint